Hi, everyone. We are going to give others a chance to come into the webinar. So we will be starting the webinar promptly at 10:05 a.m. So please just sit tight and enjoy the music until then.
I saw the part of you that only when you're older you'll see too. You'll see too. I held the better cards, but every stroke of luck has gotta bleed through. The singer was the writer, he was all the softer cut. He wouldn't come and join the party, he'd be back scribbling in his bunk. The boys were going crazy, they were like drunken dogs in heat. They'd hit out after every show and try with any girl they'd meet. Rock and roll, rock and roll. Money, drugs, desire. The world is nothing and life is love. Let's go light a fire.
Okay, we're going to start the webinar. Thank you, everyone, for making it to Clover's first of many developer webinar series. We're all very excited to have you here. My name is Mary Chris Bonzo. I am a developer advocate for the developer relations team here at Clover. And I'm also the organizer for this developer webinar series. So this initiative is going to be a monthly webinar around topics that you guys care about. So before we get started, I'm going to briefly go over the agenda and set the tone for today's webinar and future webinars. So we're going to do introductions first, and then Jacob will do his presentation. When he's done, we will be doing a Q&A session. Last thing we'll do is we'll conclude the webinar with a few very fun surprises. So I hope you all stay until the end. Now, a few notes. During Jacob's presentation, everyone is welcome to ask questions over the chat. If you're joining using the GoToMeeting desktop app, you can ask your question under the Questions tab. If you're joining using the Instant Join Viewer, you can click on the question mark icon to the right. So we're going to try our best to answer all of you guys' questions, though we do ask that you kindly limit your questions to the topic of the webinar. And if we don't get to all of your questions on time, we will get them answered after the webinar and share them with you all on community. All right, so now I'm gonna pass the mic over to Brian Nato. He has been a very strong force in pushing this initiative forward. So thank you, Brian, and take the mic, please.
Thanks, Mark Chris. Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Nato. I lead our Developer Business Strategy Initiative at Clover. Business Strategy is the newest addition to Clover's developer program and was designed to complement our developer relations and product teams. I've spoken to many of you directly over the last few months, and we'll be reaching out to many more of you very soon. We hope that this webinar series further enhances the experience you have as a valued member of the Clover ecosystem, and thanks again for joining us today.
Awesome, thank you, Brian. And now, without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic over to Jacob Abrams, who will be presenting on Clover Station and Android development tips with Clover devices. Jacob, please take it away.
Thank you, Mary Chris and Brian. All right, my name is Jacob Abrams. I am a software engineer here at Clover, working on the Device OS team. And I'm going to give you guys a presentation today about Clover Station Pro, and I'm going to give you some development tips, just general Android development tips to go along with that. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so what is Station Pro? There was an announcement today that we are going public with Clover Station Pro, our latest device. So what is this device and what makes it different from some of our other devices? Well, this device is a dual screen device. So 2 displays and a single central processing unit. So you've got a customer facing display, which is going to be the same exact size as our Clover Station 2018. Sorry, the merchant facing display is going to be the same size as Clover Station 2018, and a customer facing display, which is going to be the same size as Clover Mini. And it pretty much looks like a Clover Station 2018 connected to a Mini, but this device is actually a single a unit. It's going to be sold as a single unit rather than 2 devices. So that transitions us into why are we building Station Pro? So we created Station Pro because a lot of merchants are already buying 2 Clover devices together and tethering them. So this is connecting 2 Clover devices, usually with a USB cable, so that they can have this experience for their employees and their customers, so that they can have a screen for their customers to use and see what's going on with transactions, and simultaneously merchants entering in the details of orders on the customer's behalf. So rather than having to sell 2 devices to our merchants, that requires going through Ubi twice and setting up 2 network configurations, going through the activation process, and all that kind of stuff twice, we'd come up with a simpler solution with Station Pro that allows merchants to go through 1 setup process out of the box. Another big reason that we developed Station Pro is because when you buy a Clover Station 2018 and a Mini separately, you end up with 2 payment interfaces, right? 2 chip card interfaces, 2 magstripe swiping interfaces. And for most countries, this simply isn't useful, because in most countries, the customer has to enter a PIN when they use their credit card. This is unfamiliar to us in the United States, where we usually do kind of a sign-on screen, no PIN required for credit cards. And so we can hand our credit card to the employee of the store and they can swipe or insert it for us. But in most countries, that's simply not possible. The customer is going to be holding onto their card the whole time, and they're going to be entering their PIN number into the device pretty much every single time. So Clover Station 2018 simply couldn't be sold in any other country standalone. So it really didn't meet the needs of merchants outside the United States. So this is the reason why we've built Clover Station Pro. As you can see on the merchant-facing side, there's no payment interfaces. It's simply the touchscreen interface. Okay, so let's see here. So as you can see, the specifications here, this is going to be pretty much exactly the same screen dimensions as Station 2018 and Mini. It's going to have the same printer that we ship with Station 2018, except for it doesn't have a screen on it or NFC on it. It's just the printer. And it's running Android 8.1. And I've got some links here on this slide to documentation, most of which has already been available. One of them is fairly new. This is the Building Apps for Station Pro link. And so that's all those are up right now. And most of what I'm going to be saying now is pretty much already written down there. So, don't worry about keeping extensive notes here. We've got all that information on the website already, but I'm going to go over it now for you all. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this slide shows you here what we've got, two displays, merchant display and customer display, both showing at the same time. So I'm going to address now how Station Pro is affecting you app developers, right? So if you publish a merchant-facing app today, so that's an app that the merchant is interacting with, and that app runs on Station 2018, it's going to simply work as is on Station Pro with a few caveats. Okay, so if your app is using the deprecated platform class in Clover Android SDK, if you've written code such as if is Clover Mini, right, or if is Clover Station 2018, that kind of code and use of that platform class is simply, or any use of that deprecated platform class is simply not going to work on Station Pro because it's not a Station 2018 and it's not a Mini. So your code is unlikely to function properly. That is why we've introduced the Platform 2 class. So this will allow you to write device agnostic code, code which looks at the capabilities of the device and takes the appropriate action so that you won't have to worry about what happens when we come out with a new device each year, because we tend to come out with new devices pretty often. So you got to make sure that your apps are not using the deprecated platform class if you want them to work on Station Pro. Then the second part about if you make a merchant-facing app is much less likely. If you've written a merchant-facing tender, so if you look again at the screenshot here, figure 2, the merchant-facing tender is a button which will appear to the merchant and allow them to initiate some kind of payment on behalf of the customer. Very few apps are doing this, but if you are, that button simply isn't going to appear on Station Pro, and the main reason for that being that Station Pro doesn't have any card entry methods, and so we found it unlikely that it's going to work properly for your app. However, if you've implemented a customer-facing tender button, so on figure 4, you'll see the customer side. If you've implemented a button like that, then it's going to show up on the merchant-facing side. So either the customer or the merchant will be able to initiate that specific payment flow. Okay, so if those two caveats, the one about the deprecated platform class, and the one about the merchant-facing tender button, if those don't apply to you, then your app is almost certainly going to work on Station Pro, assuming it works on Station 2018 today. If your app doesn't even work on Station 2018 today, then you're definitely going to need to at least adjust for the screen size, and you're going to have to probably do some testing, on the emulator or on a Station 2018 or Station Pro dev kit. If you haven't submitted your APK since before January 2017, it's probably not going to work on our recent devices at all. So we really suggest that you're going to need to rebuild and resubmit if you haven't submitted since then. So that's January 2017. So it's always best to confirm that your app runs by purchasing a dev kit. We have not yet made the dev kit for Station 2018 available, but it should be available for purchase soon. We also have a bunch of improvements and bug fixes to the Clover Android SDK. They're not necessarily Station Pro related, but it's a good time to go in there and try to update to a recent release of the Clover Android SDK, and watch out for deprecation warnings. Make sure you test carefully when you're using the latest Clover Android SDK, and also please be aware that we're keeping an eye on any issues that come up, and there may be further updates to the Clover Android SDK in the coming months, as we get developers on board with this. Okay, so now let's transition to another type of app, right? So we just spent a time talking about merchant-facing apps, right? Now I'm going to talk about customer-facing apps. Again, this doesn't cover most apps. Very few apps are customer-facing, but they're out there. So if you have developed a customer-facing app, you're almost certainly going to need to make changes to it to get it to run properly on Station Pro. So on Station Pro, we've got the kiosk app always running. So that is, showing there, figure 3. Welcome to your merchant business. That app offers a number of ways to integrate with it. You may be using, for example, the customer-facing tenders that I mentioned, or you may be using some sort of customer-facing platform activities which integrate into the kiosk app. Okay, these will both work on Station Pro, but there's some changes you need to be aware of. Next slide, please. So these changes relate to the activity lifecycle in Android. Okay, so on the left here, I've got your standard activity lifecycle, right? On create, on start, on resume, and then the green thing there, that's the activity is running. Your app is running. And then, when someone leaves, it's going to go on pause, on stop, and eventually on destroy. Okay, so when your app is running on Station Pro on the customer-facing screen only, it's going to have a slightly different activity lifecycle. So you can see over here, I've highlighted the difference here. So you still get on create, you still get on start, on resume, but then you immediately go into on pause. And then while it's in on pause, it's actually still totally usable by the customer. So that's the normal state that the customer is using apps that they can see on that smaller customer-facing screen. So you need to make sure that your app isn't doing anything special and on pause that would make it such that it won't work properly. And remember, your app will still need to work on a regular Clover Mini as well. So ideally, you would have very little or almost no code in on resume and on pause, and that'll ensure that your app works both on Clover Station Pro and on our older Clover Mini devices. Okay, and then the next thing you need to worry about if you're developing customer-facing apps is Android's on-screen keyboard. Okay, so that is not going to be available to the customer with Station Pro. The reason being that the on-screen keyboard is reserved for just the main screen, and the main screen is the merchant-facing screen. So only the merchant will be able to tap on and edit text and bring up the on-screen keyboard to type in data. If you're using edit text or something else that causes the on-screen keyboard to try to show on the customer-facing display of Station Pro, it simply is not going to work. So we have updated the Clover Android SDK to offer a new API in the intents class. So take a look in there for action_keypad, and you'll see some documentation that explains how to use that intent to bring up a keyboard or keypad that allows the customer to enter whatever they want to enter. And again, this will work both on Old Mini and on the new Station Pro, so you can use this across the board. You'll have to do that if you're using edit text or on-screen keyboards for customer-facing apps. Okay, so that covers if you develop customer-facing apps. So as I mentioned, there's several things you're definitely going to have to look out for. Let's see here, and then kind of a final note about Clover Station Pro here. So, based on what I said about the Lifecycle and the on-screen keyboard and all that kind of stuff, we really recommend that if you're developing a customer-facing app, you should purchase a dev kit if you can, just to make sure your app really runs properly, because we don't have an emulator that really emulates this whole dual screen system with this kind of special Lifecycle stuff. On the other hand, if you are writing just a merchant-facing app that's just going to show to the merchant, it already works on Clover Station 2018. You didn't, none of those things apply to you. You're using Platform 2. You're not using the old deprecated platform class. All that stuff. You'll probably be okay, but you never know. A dev kit's very helpful, and it gets you a feel for the real performance characteristics, printing on real paper, having a barcode scanner. And all those things. So that's a real reason to try a dev kit. One other note is that keep your eye open for Clover Android SDK changes. As I mentioned, we think we're prepared, but we know, for example, there's one case where the cache drawer, one of the cache drawer APIs won't work with Clover Station Pro. And so we should hopefully have that fixed soon. And that covers all I wanted to say about Clover Station Pro. So let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, so now I'm just going to give you a few general Clover Android app development tips. So this is not specific to Station Pro. We're just going to talk a little bit about general ideas and tips when you're building an Android app on Clover. Okay, so try to make your app device agnostic as possible, right? So as you know, we're coming out with new devices very frequently, and so we've had the same issue ourselves here at Clover. We've written code that says, is Clover Mini, is Clover Flex, this kind of stuff, and it doesn't always work right when we come out with a new device, and we've got to scramble and do a lot of fixes and all that kind of work. So we've been working ourselves hard here to write code that adjusts for the screen sizes, adjusts for the different characteristics, the different camera characteristics and printer characteristics. There have been updates to the Clover Android SDK also related to printing that should allow you to adjust for different print paper widths. So try your best to write your app so that when a new screen size comes out or a new printing paper width comes out, it just works, right? Test it on different emulator screen sizes, see if it adjusts properly. Then you can be ready ahead of time. Next tip is try to make your Clover app work offline. So it's a big use case for our merchants. Merchants are all over, all over the world now, and a lot of them don't have great internet connections. A lot of them are also using a Clover Flex, which is on their cell modem, and they may go in and out of range of internet connectivity, and they want to still be able to use as much of their device and as many of your apps as well when their internet goes down for seconds, minutes, or hours, right? They don't want to see errors or just be unable to do things. So for that reason, you should be using the Clover Android SDK to do as much as you can, and not using hitting Clover REST endpoints directly from your app, unless you absolutely have to. So a lot of the functionality that you need dealing with orders, inventory, employees, all these kinds of things, that's available through the Clover Android SDK, and the Clover Android SDK will deal with flaky internet connections. It will, save the data that you are, updating or deleting or inserting for you, and put that in a queue, and make sure that it eventually gets to Clover servers and syncs with other devices when possible. And you don't have to worry about, what to do if you hit a REST endpoint and get a network error. So that's why we really recommend use the Clover Android SDK to do as much as you possibly can. And then the last point is a very minor point, but use contracts to query for lists of data. So what does that really mean? So if you look in the Clover Android SDK, you're going to find things like the inventory connector, which lets you make changes and updates to inventory and allows you to get inventory items. But you're also going to find in the SDK the inventory contract. And the contract we just use for querying data or getting data out. So, inventory can be huge. It could be, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of items. And the inventory connector, for example, it's only able to return up to 500 items. After that, you're just not going to see any more data. So the performance is also not that great when you're trying to transfer that much from one app to another. So it's best if you are querying data and trying to get lists of data that you use the available contracts. So search through the Clover Android SDK for various contracts. We should have them available for inventory and orders and employees, hopefully. So that pretty much covers all that I wanted to say to you guys. Thank you so much for listening, and I will pass it back to Mary Chris.
Thank you, Jacob. So now it's time to do the Q&A session. Jacob, we've assigned the questions to you, and it'll be available under your questions tab, so you can take it away from here.
Okay, thank you. So I've got one question here. What does the adoption rate for Station Pro look like so far? So we just sent out the press release for Station Pro in the United States today, and it's not been shipped to any United States merchants yet. There was an early launch just literally a couple weeks ago in the EU, and I honestly can't tell you exactly how many devices have gone out there so far. It's still really, really early. Okay, let's see here. Okay, so then there's another question. From a positioning perspective, will this take the place of Station 2018? Also a very good question. I believe that in the United States, obviously we're going to continue to sell Station 2018 for some merchants who only want a merchant-facing experience. So there's things like restaurants. So in the United States, of course, you put your card on the table, they take it back and charge for you. Obviously, that's only possible in the United States, but there are a lot of restaurants in the United States that do that. And so for them, Station 2018 will still be a viable option sold to them. But for anyone else, any other type of merchant that was buying two devices and tethering them, we're really going to push them to be buying Station Pro instead. So that's a pretty large segment of the population of merchants here in the United States. And obviously, this is going to be kind of the de facto full POS experience device for all the other countries out there, EU and otherwise. All right, let's see here. Next question. We use a custom merchant tender for loyalty purposes, not to make a payment. This is for merchant only. and can't be made available to the customer. Are you saying that this won't work anymore? Possibly. So I think you're gonna have to look into that and see how you can come up with an experience that makes sense for both the merchant and the customer. You know, because as we said, in countries like you know, in the EU, it's the customer who's used to initiating the payment in some way or another, right? And even if it's loyalty and you just have a card that you just show to the merchant, maybe, you know, scan something ideally that the customer can do themselves. Let's see here. Next question, can we print custom Android web view using the Clover printer connector? We have a print job, which is the view print job, and that should work just the same on this device as any other device. Basically, this device has no real changes to how you do printing compared to any of our other devices. So you shouldn't have to make any changes at all to your code with regards to printing, right? As I mentioned, it's got the same exact print head and paper size and all that stuff as Station 2018. Let's see here. Can you elaborate on the use of contracts for data between Clover and the developer's app? I've only ever used the connector. Sure. So you're definitely going to want to just search the Clover Android SDK for classes with the name contract in them. And you should also take a look at developer.android.com. This is just the standard Android development practice documentation website from Google. And they have a large section on contracts there. And the most famous example being something like the contacts contract, right? So if you were writing a regular Android app for a phone and you wanted to get a list of the user's contacts, you'd be using the contacts contract, which has methods such as which provides usage of the methods such as query, right, which allows you to query all the contacts, some of the contacts, and so we have the same pattern that we follow exactly in the Clover Android SDK, where you can query inventory for some items, all items, and you get back a cursor which you iterate over. Again, this is all documented pretty well at developer.android.com, how to use content resolver to query data from a contract. So definitely look at Google's documentation. And then we have samples, I believe, too, as well in the Clover Android SDK. So look for usages of contract in there as well. Okay, let's see here. All right, can we develop for the Station Pro with emulators and then validate with a development kit? Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You know, especially if you are just building a merchant-facing app, and you just want to test out the screen size. Maybe you haven't built. I mean, if you already built Station 2018, then you're probably fine. You can just run that in an emulator and see that it works properly in an emulator. An emulator is also a good test because an emulator will not respond to the platform class that's been deprecated, because an emulator is not going to say, is Clover Station 2018 true or is Clover Mini true? So you can be sure that you're writing device agnostic code by testing in the emulator. So yeah, I mean, definitely it's good to get started by just double checking that your app runs properly in an emulator, and then validating on a dev kit later. Absolutely, I mean, that should be fine. All right, I think that covers all the questions that I can answer at this time.
Okay, thank you so much, Jacob. Now, for the rest of the questions that we didn't get to, again, do not worry because we will make them available to all of you on community. Now on to the surprises I promised all of you. So surprise number one, this developer webinar series, it's all for you guys, our third-party developers. It's all about your needs and your desires. This is why I highly encourage all of you to take the survey that's going to pop up as soon as you end the webinar. And that survey is going to ask all of you questions to help us shape the future of this initiative. So it includes questions on topics you want us to cover for future webinars. And now, surprise number two, if you've been excited about Clover's e-commerce API and want to learn more about it, or you want to know why you should even be integrating with it, then you're in for a special treat because our next webinar will be just about that. All right, well, that concludes the webinar. Thank you everyone for coming. Thank you, Jacob Abrams, for presenting. Thank you to the DevRel team and Brian Nato for all of your help. And we will see all of you next month. Thank you so much. Bye.